Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I am Auron MacIntyre. A new term has arisen from kind of the rational centrists. It has come from many mainstream conservatives as well. Many establishment conservatives are also using this phrase. You see it especially used to attack the new Christian right, or what many people will call Christian nationalists. The new term is called the woke right, and obviously this comes from the classic strategy of saying, "Oh, something my enemy does, I don't like it, and so I will apply it to other people I don't like, and therefore, boom, I have a new term." Right? This is the new term of containment. The left is woke, and the people on the right I don't like are also woke. Everything I don't like is woke. It's like communism or fascism, right? Everything I don't like is this thing, and therefore I win the debate because I've attached the term that I don't like to this. It's a little bit of the new version of horseshoe theory, but I want to dive into this term because I think the people trying to establishment, while they're failing quite miserably, they are revealing a couple of different issues that the old, or I should say, the established right has with the current right, the emerging right. It's a little weird to call what's happening right now the new right because really it's a resurgence in many ways of what used to be the old right before kind of the William F. Buckley National Review crowd purged out much of real right wing thought in the United States. So new and old can be pretty confusing terms when we talk about the right wing. But I want to talk about the term the new right, why people are deciding to use it, what issues they're taking with kind of the emerging opposition to the status quo, and how we should probably think about political opposition going forward. What's effective, what should be discarded, what should be adopted, all of those things. But before we get into that, guys, I want to go ahead and tell you about today's sponsor. Hey guys, I'm sure you know that your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. I found it super easy to use. When you wake up in the morning, you just breathe into the Lumen, and the app on the phone tells you what ratio of carbs versus fat you're burning. Then it'll give you suggestions on how to tailor your diet to improve your metabolism. I really like that it also tracks your shift before and after a workout so you can understand how effective your exercise has been. And you can track all of your macros in the app, and it serves as a great motivator that allows you to see your results and adjust your plan to optimize your metabolism. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/Auron and use the promo code Auron to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Auron and use the promo code Auron at checkout for 15% off. All right, guys, before we get started, I also want to remind you that election season is coming up, and that means that censorship season is coming up. Big tech always ramps up their demonetization and censorship as we approach an election. And with Trump in the situation he's in, that's not going to change. It's only going to get worse. So remember, if you want to support me and the many other people who get to have their platform, their voice heard because of the Blaze, you can head over to blazetv.com and use the promo code Auron to get $20 off your subscription. That allows you to go ahead and support this show, and it also means that you get access to every show, even some of the ones that have been pulled off of YouTube and other platforms. So if you want to get access to everything that I make and you want to support me and make sure that I get to continue to tell you what I think about things like the election, like the attempt to control the opposition with terms like the woke right, then you need to head over to blazetv.com and use, again, that promo code Auron for $20 off. All right. So the woke right, what is it? Where did this come from? Why do we suddenly have to hear this all of a sudden? If you paid any attention to what is happening, particularly with the Christian nationalist bloc, there are a lot of people pushing back on this new emergent right wing, one that is not interested in neocon foreign policy or economics, is not primarily interested in playing the loyal opposition to a regime that is destroying the United States, It's not interested in playing the game of neutrality when it's very clear that our country is pushing a particular agenda, a particular moral vision. This is a group of people on the right who actually want to go ahead and make a difference. They see what is happening. They see that the strategy that has been implemented by the conservative movement for decades is a failure. It has failed to conserve everything it has pretended to care about. It has prioritized following the rules of some kind of rigged game instead of prioritizing the well-being of the people of the United States and the moral vision shared by so many in the United States, one that was set forward in many ways by the founding fathers. They are very tired of this controlled opposition and they want to try something new. Now, like I said, a lot of this is centered on the Christian nationalists, but it's not exclusive to them. I myself, like I've said many times, have a few issues with Christian nationalism, its terminology, and its application. But ultimately, I agree with them that the current situation we have is untenable, that this is something that needs to be pushed back against in a real and meaningful way, and that we need to shift the way that we understand political power and political neutrality if we're going to have any impact on the wider culture and the wider political framework inside the United States. So, for those who go ahead and criticize people who want to do this unorthodox opposition to the regime as the woke right, what are some of the things that they think makes this woke? What about this approach to right wing or conservative ideas, however you want to frame this, this traditional idea? What approach about this makes this woke? Why is this the woke right? Well, there are three main pillars I think that they attack when they try to criticize opposition to the current status quo as the woke right. And I want to make it very clear that ultimately this is opposition to the status quo. Most of the people throwing this language out are like, oh, well, I oppose the transitioning of children. And so therefore I'm a conservative. Well, that's great. I think you should do that. It's horrific. It's the bare minimum of being a socially acceptable human to oppose the physical mutilation of children. Good for you, I guess. Congratulations. This does not make you a conservative. This is the bare minimum for being a human. And so coming in here and telling me that, oh, well, this is what makes me the establishment conservative. Okay, I guess, but no, that is insufficient to what we are looking at here. I think there are three things that they tend to attack about the right that is actually trying to be effective, the real right, consistently. And so I want to run through those real quick. The first one is the use of power. So many people who are in this kind of containment, rational centrist, establishment conservative scenario, they fear the application of power, right? The old idea is that the conservatives they worry about government power. We should never use government power, no matter what. That's our first principle: small government, no use of power. And so it's really important that when you win an election, the only thing you do is maybe reduce cut back on the things that the left has done, but you don't actually do anything. You don't take any substantive action. Your job is really just to roll back, to kind of play, to tap the brake on the left, right? That you're the regulator that keeps the reaction from going completely out of control. That's your only purpose. Of course, what a lot of people are recognizing is that by playing this game for so long, conservatives, the right, have boxed themselves into this scenario in which the Constitution, even if you just believe in the basics of the Constitution, they made it clear, the founders made it clear that it was ambition checking ambition that would control the power of opposing political parties. If you have one side that says, okay, well, we're going to use power, and one side that says, well, we're never going to use power, that's our main goal, that's our main ideology, is we just never use power, that's what we see as our principles. Well, the side that's going to use power is going to win, because the founding fathers did not set up a system where one side uses power and the other side doesn't, and that's what fixes things. They specifically said, look, no, it's the ambition of each side pushing against each other that will ultimately check each other. And the mutually assured destruction strategy, the idea that you don't use this power, this weapon, only works if the other guys know that if they do, you will fight back, that you will create a significant blowback, a significant cost for what they do. But if you've stated that your principle is we never fight back, we never take power, then you're a fool and your opponents are going to run all over you. And they have in every situation. We see this. The left gets into office, they make radical changes, they use the power of the office, and they use coordinated powers with other portions of what I call the total state, the academia, the unelected bureaucracy, the media, all of these things, they corporations, they act simultaneously to grab as much power as possible. And when the right gets in power, all they do is say, okay, well, we're going to slow that down a little bit. Maybe we'll even undo one or two things, but usually that's too much. Don't let's not get crazy. Ronald Reagan ran on getting rid of the Department of Education, and in 2024, the Department of Education is still here. So conservatives have just failed to get rid of the vast majority of even brand new, that's it was brand new at the time, the Department of Education. Conservatives have failed to get rid of even brand new leftist policies on a very regular basis. But maybe, in these big moments when they have their big victories, they'll roll back something significant. We saw that's recently with the Supreme Court after many, many decades of things like affirmative action and Roe v. Wade. Those rulings have finally been slightly rolled back by the Supreme Court, but they became the law of the land for many decades and shaped policy, shaped the thinking of Americans. And ultimately, conservatives are starting to realize this. Look, every time our opponents are in power, they make massive moves, and we get in power, and our first principle is, oh no, we don't do anything. We never take power. And we can get completely destroyed in the meantime. Yeah, okay, you can close the border a little bit while Trump is in power, but if Biden leaves the border open for his entire presidency, then it doesn't really matter because he has brought in so many new voters and so many generations of new voters that will be more likely to be loyal to the left, that he permanently changes both the demographics and the democracy of the United States for many, many years, many, many decades, possibly beyond that. And so, yeah, you have to win basically every time, and they have to only win once to go ahead and shift things in a permanent basis because they're willing to use power and you're not. This also means that a lot of people are recognizing on the right that you need to understand that things are not neutral. Our institutions are not neutral. They were never neutral. The neutrality of our institutions is a lie. Sorry, but it turns out that every one of these institutions is run by people and people have politics. And so you don't solve the questions of politics by just handing power over to these institutions and saying, oh, we're getting the politics out of this, right? We hear this all the time. We need to get politics out of our medicine. We need to get politics out of our social policies or whatever. But that never works because actually every one of these decisions is informed by a worldview. You never actually have this political neutrality. But all of these establishment conservatives and many of these kind of radical centrist types built their entire brand on this, right? It's all about low government, small government. It's all about individual liberty. We have to let the experts do their thing. That's what matters. It's about letting these institutions operate in this apolitical way, that organizing the world in that way allows us to avoid any of the big questions. And that's really what matters. When we're in power, we should be trying to shrink the size of government or something like that, even though it seems that we reliably fail on this at every opportunity. And we need to trust the neutrality of every one of these operations and institutions. And so they see conservatives finally saying things like, okay, I mean, sure, you keep saying that we have these neutral institutions, but we lose every time. Maybe we should be applying power. Maybe when we get into power, we should go ahead and set things up in a way that benefits us, benefits the people that we care about, that we think are going to continue to vote for us, that we are serving them first. When the left votes for someone, they have a very basic political interaction with that person. They say, okay, you vote for me and I will give you stuff or I will achieve a goal for you. I will look for these things, right? The libertarians had the shock with with Trump recently. Trump shows up to the libertarian convention famously, right? It's a big coup for the libertarians to have somebody like Trump get in front of them. I believe they had RFK as well. And Trump promises them something. He says, look, I'm going to put somebody in office. I'm going to put somebody in my cabinet who's a libertarian. I will give you a seat at the table and let people know that you are relevant. I'll also go ahead and pardon some people that you think it's a high priority to go ahead and pardon. It's the founder of the Silk Road. I forget his name. But I'm gonna do things for you. Like, you vote for me, and I will deliver you wins on issues and things, right? And this is a very confusing thing. Like a lot of libertarians booed him. Some people are saying, "Well, this is a very odd way of doing politics." No, this is the most basic way of doing politics. This is what politics is. It's patronage. You go in front of people. You say, "I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to secure something for you that you will appreciate, and you will vote for me." That reciprocal relationship is not crazy. It's just what basically every non-ideological politician did before kind of our current era in which everything has to be hyper ideological. And the left still gets to play this kind of politics all the time, right? They get to demand particular gimmies, they get to demand particular programs, they get to demand a seat at the table in different power structures. They get to fight for control of different institutions, and they get to do this without any kind of shame because that's the type of politics that they're allowed to do. And this is something that worries establishment conservatives very much because this is not the type of politics we do, right? We don't deliver anything. GOP voters are just supposed to vote for the GOP because, like, lower taxes or something. And they're never supposed to actually expect anything of substance from their government. They're never supposed to expect any real tangible benefit other than maybe getting to keep a little bit of extra money in their pocket from the people that they elect. And so this bizarre form of politics Trump is doing really shook people like libertarians who are used to this hyper ideological understanding of politics. Everything needs to be true, needs to be neutral. Everything needs to be about small government. We don't do things for people when we do politics. That would be crazy, right? And that's another thing about Trump, right? And this is the second thing that the people who are trying to criticize the quote unquote woke right will do is they don't like the fact that people like Trump care more about the people of the United States than they care about the ideology that's supposed to undergird the United States. This is often the people who say America is a dream, or it's the Martin Luther King thing. America is essentially a dream, or America is a set of ideals or principles. And no, America is not those things. America is a nation. It is a people, and we have confused this. We've conflated this. The modern understanding of the nation state is relatively new. It's not the way that most people have existed throughout history. They understood that peoples and nations were one thing, and that states or governments are another. And that gets conflated very often, especially because in the United States, we were a collection of states, a collection of governments that became one government. And so people use the word state in a very confused manner. And so the thing that we need to remember when we're talking about this is that the United States, for this new emergent right, is not just a loose set of principles, but it's a specific set of traditions, people, language, heritage, history. It's a connection that is far more serious and far more sacred, right? And that is really critical because if Donald Trump is going to make promises, he has to make them to people. He has to go and say, there are people that I am looking after, whose well being I am prioritizing, and I will make them promises as a politician. And that is something that really worries. When Donald Trump got in there and his opposition to the neocon base was just, okay, what does the average middle class or working class GOP voter want to hear? They want to hear that they're going to keep their job. Okay, well, that turns out that then I'm against maybe this free trade mantra. Maybe I do think certain level of protectionism or tariff or whatever is worth uh, getting involved in. Maybe I need to look at my trade policy. Well, let's see. They also want to make sure that their neighborhoods are secure. They're against crime. Okay, well then I'm for law and order. They want to make sure that the border is closed because they're worried about the demographic and cultural transformation of their country, along with the high amount of crime and drugs and other things that can come in with illegal immigration, unchecked, unfettered immigration. And so Trump says, okay, well, I'm against that as well. What do they not want to do? They're tired of their sons dying in wars that they don't understand and have no benefit to them. Okay, well, my foreign policy then is that I am against this adventurism, this foreign policy adventurism. I'm still for a strong military. I still honor the military, but I honor it by not just misusing it and throwing it out there and securing contracts for defense contractors or bolstering the budget of NATO or something like that. So Trump's policies were aimed at a specific group of people. those promises were made to a specific group of people. Well, it was not ideological. He didn't line up all of these things and say, "Oh, well, this is what some think tank or some economic system demands of me." He said, "There's a group of people specifically that I want to serve, and I'm going to go ahead and serve them." And that is a very dangerous thing, again, for a lot of these containment people on the right, a lot of these established conservatives, because they've spent a lot of time telling conservatives that they don't have an identity, that the worst thing in the world is identity, that everything is about individualism, and we need to abhor identity at all moments. Now, don't get me wrong, the left version of identity politics is ugly and gross. It's cheap. Their identities are plastic and uh, they don't mean anything. They have no real grounding. And the way that they're used in particular is always driving us towards hate. It's a bunch of Radio Rwanda playing in the background for their benefit. And so I'm not here to advocate for their, just identity politics for the right. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that the right does need to answer the questions of identity. One of the big problems that we've had, one of the reasons that the left have won so many of these battles, is that they have been allowed to explore issues that the right has simply not been allowed to explore. This is something that has come up over and over again as I've been reading through these really important books recently. Things like Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations, where he talks about the end of the kind of just the United States Soviet Union bipolar world, and the fact that once those two economic ideological systems stop being kind of the way that the thing that bifurcated the entire globe, instead, these different regions were realigning under civilizational blocks, a more classical understanding that was meant to answer a very simple question: who are we? We're not just capitalists or just communists. That's an insufficient level of meaning and identity for the average person. They need something that is more organic, more holistic, something that ties them to their ancestors, ties them to their religion, ties them to their language, ties them to the place that they stand. They need something more. Okay. And so that they said, these different civilizations, Huntington says, all of them are trying to answer the question, who are we? And in many ways, that means that they were trying to modernize, they're trying to bring themselves into the modern world, but in a way that was not defined by either the United States or the Soviet Union. They were looking for alternatives that allowed them to flourish in the modern world, but keep the character, the identity that made them who they are. R. Reno also talks about this in his book Return of the Strong Gods. How after the World War II, the post-war liberal consensus worked very hard to get rid of all the strong gods. We need to get rid of national identity. We need to get rid of all of these things, religion, all of these things that have caused war in previous eras, and we need to get everybody hooked on basically these low-level, these small gods, right? These economic identities, these kind of things that no one's going to really go to war over, right? That's the idea. Now, even then, that hasn't really been successful. People have still gone to war over those things. But the point is that they wanted to put away all of those classical existential questions about humanity and say, "Oh, well, no, we're gonna operate only on these small, dispassionate identities." And what we've seen is really that leaves us open to ideological possession, right? We've seen that what happens when you strip away these more meaningful, grounded, organic identities is not that people have no identity, but what they do is they start adopting these gross, plastic, generalized identities offered by people like the left, right? And when you can consume these identities and discard them as if they were some kind of boutique you were walking through and just grabbing whatever you want off the shelf, but wearing it for a moment and then replacing it with something else, then people become utterly deracinated. There's nothing to stop them from being eaten up by the next wave, the next round of propaganda, the next thing that's going to flood into their social media feeds and dominate the conversation and decide whether or not they can get hired at a job, right? If you don't have something like a religion, if you don't have something like a community, if you don't have a tie to your heritage and your history, then all these things can simply be blown away and the next thing can come in to replace it. And that's why all of these identities that have been imposed on us on the left are more and more radical. They're more and more insane because each one of them is completely preying on us because we are unrooted. We have no way to understand. We have no firm ground, no axioms that define us as a people, as a civilization. And much of the woke right, as it's called, are people who are simply willing to say we need to talk about these issues. Christian nationalism, I think, right now is the most popular version of this. They say we need to ground our identity in Christianity. And I think certainly that's critical that that has to be a part of the equation. I don't think that that's sufficient. And to be fair to guys like Stephen Wolfe, I've read his book on Christian nationalism. He does attempt to tackle this. So this is not me trying to go ahead and throw some shade at him. He does tackle this in his book in a way that many other people would have been unwilling to. But ultimately, this is the current front of this, saying we need some kind of identity that is shared, and it needs to be grounded in Christianity. Of course, this is true. We know there are no neutral institutions. Institutions will have a shared moral vision. They will use their power to go ahead and push forward an idea of who we are and what we should be and how we should be ordering our civilization. And if it's not going to be Christianity, then it's going to be one of these, again, cheap plastic identities. It's going to be these increasingly gross, cosmopolitan, hedonistic identities. And those things have to be defeated. And so that's another thing that the kind of establishment conservatives are very worried about. We're not supposed to talk about this. The one thing the left has told us about is that they're the only ones that get to talk about identity. They're the only ones that get to have that conversation. When they say, let's have an honest conversation about race or something like that, they never mean it. They mean, you're going to listen to me berate you about your identity, your race, your religion, your sex, whatever it is. Like that when we have an honest conversation, that means I get to berate you without you saying anything or having any defense. And to be fair, the right has mainly said, okay, fine, right? Because they feel like they lost on that issue somewhere. That it's a third rail. You're not allowed to touch it. It's toxic. But we're not doing anybody any favors by avoiding this. Yeah, it's dangerous. And yeah, there are bad things that can happen, right? When we talk about this, for sure. But there are bad things happening now. And so we need to be adults. We need to be willing to step into this. And the woke right, as many people who are trying to do containment like to call it, are some of the people recognizing this truth that we have to be involved in this discussion. If we cede it entirely to the left, then we are going to lose this. That's all there is to it. The last pillar of the woke of the criticism of the quote unquote woke right that a lot of people put out there, I think, is a distinction of reasoning. They worry about the way that the right is approaching certain issues. They think that this new insurgent right is adopting too many continental philosophies. They'll often call this the postmodern traditionalists, right? I get called this by people like James Lindsay. Watch out, it's a postmodern traditionalist. They're coming for you guys. They're just the Frankfurt School, but they've got trad Caths. I'm not Catholic, by the way, but they've got crucifixes or something, and you've got to be very, very worried about that. And this is just ridiculous. So what they're identifying here is a long-standing kind of false dichotomy between being and becoming, right? A lot of the understanding on the right, or I should say, a lot of the understanding in the West, especially the post-Enlightenment tradition of the West, has been built on this idea that we need to create a large amount of objectivity, right? Everything has to be hyper-rational. Everything needs to be plucked out of its context, examined, quantified, categorized, and then put back down in its kind of lifeless, suspended animation, so we can understand it. I understand everything about this as it is right now. I'm the most objective person because I've zoomed out as fully as possible, and this allows me to better grasp everything about this object in a very real way. Now, to be fair, this is true, right? Like, there is a power to this technique where we look into these things in these hyper rationalistic, unconnected, objective ways. We pull it out of its surrounding. We say, this is the thing. I'm going to understand this thing in this particular way. That does produce a certain type of understanding to the extreme, and it can be very useful. I'm not here saying that there's no value to that analysis. However, this is often like grabbing a butterfly and put it under glass. Like, you can study that butterfly in great detail. You can understand, you can turn it around, you can get a great look at it, you can label everything about it, right? But you've also killed the butterfly, right? You've also separated it from what makes it alive. You don't see it in nature. You don't see what it's feeding off of. You don't see the way that it's interacting with the world around it. You don't see the plants that it lands on, where it lays its eggs. You don't see all these critical parts of the lifestyle of the butterfly when you just try to trap it under glass and analyze it in this particular way. Now you have to do that to some extent if you understand certain things, but you also have to contextualize the butterfly if you want to grasp it. It's a living thing. It's something that is involved in being. It is not just a disconnected object for you to go ahead and analyze and categorize in a dispassionate way. And so much of what we've tried to do in our current tradition is to maximize that to the fullest. And that has left a lot of kind of Western post Enlightenment ideology vulnerable to this postmodern analysis, right? This is why the postmoderns have been so powerful at deconstructing the modern world is they said, "Oh no, you left this entire half of existence out of the equation. You looked entirely, you closed your eye and looked through one eye, through one lens, and that lens allowed you to magnify and get closer and understand things in a way you couldn't understand them before. You're staring in the microscope looking at the butterfly, and that's a powerful tool, yes. But the fact that you thought you did that for so long that you forgot that you have another eye, and actually the world under the microscope is not the real world, and that there's a whole nother world outside of the microscope that is important and valuable to understand. Because you have done that, you have created a scenario that makes you very easy to critique. And that is what happened, is that a lot of these guys stepped into this moment, this postmodern moment, and said, we have answers that you don't because you have ignored this critical aspect that reality is actually grounded in something, that it's not just objective and pulled back, but there is an actual lived experience. There's a being, there's a becoming, there's a connection to what is happening around you that contextualizes who you are. The actions, the processes, the experience around something defines it. It is not simply pulled out alone, killed, and then looked at objectively from this really artificial angle. And that has allowed them to go in and say, oh well, no, language and culture and all these things form all of the things that you're holding on to as objective truth. Now, to be fair to people who are rightfully worried about postmodernism, in a lot of cases, they took this way too far. They used this radically to deconstruct what was left of traditional cultures instead of recognizing that this actually explained so much of what was valuable about traditional cultures. And they use that to go ahead and disassemble not just tradition, but the modern world. And they wanted to replace it with all the horrible things that we associate with many postmodern thinkers. And we're right to do. This is not me making some kind of defense in general of postmodernism or its tenets. But what I'm saying is the reason that the right was so easy to deconstruct, the reason that conservatism, that even the moderate left, the classical liberals were easy to deconstruct, is that they completely closed themselves to this understanding of the world, this analysis of the world. And this creates a huge problem because we are actually connected to these things. We are not just objectively, we're not just an idea, right? We're not just a set of principles. We are people with a shared identity, a shared way of being, living our lives inside of several connections inside a language, inside families, inside so many things that contextualize who we are as people. And if we're going to look at the real world and understand what makes us organically healthy, makes us happy, increases our flourishing, we have to understand it in that context. It's good to be virtuous, but we can only be virtuous inside a specific community. It's good to have liberty, but liberty has to be ordered inside of a community. You can only truly be virtuous if you are exercising that virtue in a community. This is what Aristotle told us. This is not some radical, crazy postmodern understanding of reality. I wanted to read you something. It's a passage from John Jay. This is in Federalist number 2. He says, "With equal pleasure, I have as often taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint councils, arms and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established their general liberty and independence. this country and this people seem to have been made for each other. And it appears as if it was designed a design of providence, that inheritance so proper and convenient for a band of brethren united to each other by the strongest ties should never split into a number of unsocial, jealous, and alien sovereignties. The entire point here from John Jay is that America is not just a set of principles. He does list a set of governing principles, but he says those governing principles flow from a shared ancestry, a shared language, a shared religion, similar matters and customs, right? That all of these things are contextualized, that these things matter as we move forward together. And the biggest criticism of people who call this the woke right is that they understand that actually these contexts matter in the same way that people on the woke left understand these contexts matter. But they still do matter. Just because the left have understood one piece of something that is true, and that has allowed them to deconstruct so much of what the kind of controlled right, the centrists, and all these people have established, doesn't mean it's not true. It means you need to understand it better. You need to understand why you were so weak to this. You need to understand, James Burnham said that liberalism is the ideology of Western suicide because it removes the ability of the nation to prefer itself to any other. And you must, if you are going to defend anything, prefer it to something else. I cannot defend my family if I do not prefer them over a stranger. I cannot defend, my country if I do not prefer it over the alien. You cannot love your wife if you not prefer her over other women. It is that particularity and that preference for what is familiar, what you are connected to, what you are grounded in, that allows you to protect it. And the founders understood this. This is again, oh boy, it's the woke right. Oh, you mean the guy who wrote the Federalist Papers? That woke right? John Jay, the radical? I mean, he was radical for his time, of course, radical in the sense that he just had an American Revolution. But he should not be radical now for people who are pretending to protect the American tradition. The American tradition is founded in many things, including a shared people, heritage, identity, language, set of customs, religion. Now, that doesn't mean that the United States cannot and has not assimilated people to that way of life. But that process is very slow, it takes a lot of time. It's multi-generational, and it can only be done for a certain number of people. Often it's easier for people who are already closer to that tradition. You can't just take people and pluck them out of nowhere, drop them into the United States, and expect the magic dirt in the Constitution to turn them into Americans. That's not how it works. No one believed that, not the founding fathers, not Aristotle. Nobody believed this about people. That is not how people work. We are not interchangeable widgets. We are not fungible. We have particularities, and those particularities make us more likely to group with other people, to get along with other people, to combine together in a way that allows us to have a shared political tradition as long as we share some of these key aspects. Again, that doesn't mean that this form of assimilation cannot occur. But first and foremost, it should be the decision of the people whether or not they should be allowing people in. I think right now we should be closing our borders entirely. We can't assimilate the people who are already here. We certainly don't need any more here. And then we have to ask serious questions once we close the borders and deport people who are here illegally, how we would assimilate into one shared identity, if that's even possible. But you can't even have that conversation if you don't have closed borders and removal of people who should not be here in the first place. And we don't have any of those things at the moment. So people who are on the quote unquote woke right simply recognize that actually human beings have a specific context in which they exist, and that it's important to understand that, how it influences things, that people can't actually just adopt a bunch of a priori principles and suddenly become Americans, but there's actually a particular way of being, a tradition, a faith that is all tied to these things. And while you may be able to assimilate a certain number of people, especially if they're closer to that tradition, then you could do that. But that again should be something that you decide as a people together. And these are all things that the mainstream, kind of controlled right does not like, because they are just bought into this wildly liberal idea that anyone can come in. And remember things like, Bernie Sanders accused the Koch brothers of supporting open borders. He said that's a right wing Koch brothers conspiracy that you can have open borders. Now, Bernie Sanders has changed that tune because he wanted to get paid and he wanted to have certain positions in his party. But he was being true there. Even as a socialist, he recognized that he said open borders is a right wing issue because that's going to destroy your country. That's going to destroy the neighborhoods. That's going to keep people from being able to get jobs. That's going to depress labor. When he was caring about the people for a moment instead of playing the game of politics, he spoke the truth about the dangers of this. And so much of this has been posed has been pushed by like the Cato Institute and these other libertarian think tanks. I know libertarians are going to hate that. They're going to be like, that's regime libertarians if it helps you, whatever. They're pushed by these people who are pushing these extreme liberal policies, saying it doesn't matter. We don't have to worry about these things. We can adopt any and every person we want. Everyone who flows across the border comes into America and they're just fine. It's just an economic zone, bro. It doesn't have, we're not a real country. It's not a nation, right? It's just a state. It's just a government operating an economic zone. It's not actually a people. You could just, as long as you come in and you say the couple magic words, then you're an American, right? These are things that are unacceptable to a lot of people on the new right. Now, I've used the term woke right a couple times here, and you might say, if you're familiar with my work, Auron, why would you do that? Because you tell people all the time not to use newspeak, not to adopt the language of your enemies, and that's true. You're absolutely right. If you called me out for that, if you recognize that, the reason I'm doing it is because it's such a joke. Right? The only reason I'm using this term is because of the people who are pushing it have already failed. It's so embarrassing to watch them do this. It's so clear how ham-fisted their attempt to force this term is that I'm not even worried about it. Like I'm really not. I don't think they have any chance of advancing this. These people are so desperately unpopular. It's so clear that they're losing. It's so clear that their attempts to containment are so pathetic that I don't even fear this piece of newspeak. Again, don't adopt it. Don't call yourselves the woke right or whatever. But I'm not worried about talking about it because this is such a failed attempt from the beginning that I don't think we need to worry about that. So that said, guys, this is that I wanted to explain, why people are suddenly using this term, what the motivation was, what the three key things that they were attacking were, and why I think that those are failures to understand the political situation we're in. Because ultimately, we need all of those tools that they're attacking to go ahead and address our current political reality. And so, anybody coming at you and saying we can't address these things, we can't use these things, we can't understand these things, or that makes us woke, those people are just asking to fail. They're just people who are looking to lose. And we need to reject that. We need to reject that loser ideology. It's been destroying the right for a long time. It's destroying the conservative movement for a long time. It's made it completely ineffectual. It hasn't conserved anything. And if we're going to have any chance at understanding what we want to preserve, right, what we want to be able to prefer, then we have to understand where that comes from. And that means that we have to go ahead and engage with a lot of things that many people in the rational centrists or the control containment right don't want to get involved in. All right, guys, let's go ahead and look over at our super chats here. The questions of the people. We've got Oxwagon saying the woke right started as a way for the left UG pundits to gate. That's a good term there. To gatekeep actual conservatives out of conservatism. The left me types aren't content to join your big tent and they expect to rule it. Yeah, I'm going to steal that term from you. I like that left UG pundits. That's a good one. Yeah, so much of this is being pushed by people who were just on the left 5-10 years ago. That came to the right because they thought the right was basically the new Obama Democrat Party. And they found out that actually maybe there's some people here who are actually interested in winning. They actually want to conserve things. They're not just interested in becoming the new neocons. They have a real opposition to what's happening right now. And so many of the people pushing this woke right stuff are just these classical liberal types who, these IDW types who got fed up with the left because it went a little too far, but they don't think they did anything wrong and they think they have the right to rule. And so they should be able to walk into conservatives and say, no, I dictate what you believe now. And you're absolutely right to say that needs to be rejected. Let's see. Treadle says, nice argument, Auron, but have you considered all power is one ring and you are Boromir? Yeah, again, we have to worry about, if we ever use any power, then it immediately corrupts us. And there's no way that we can go ahead and be the virtuous, clean, small government conservatives because we'll have attempted to wield the ring. This is a mistake. Power will always exist. That doesn't mean I'm not, by the way, for a certain level of small government. I am actually in favor of small government, but not because Small government is itself an end good, but because small government allows for virtuous communities to take care of themselves. But in order to do that, you must actually have virtuous communities. And so without those regional uh, power structures, those intermediate power structures that stand against the centralized state, then whining about the use of power doesn't matter because you don't have the things that would allow you to actually stand against power. Power will exist; it will be wielded by someone. If it isn't you, someone else will use it to remake the country in their image. Cooper Weirdo says, smells like right wing SJWs to me. A desperate attempt of memeing normies trying hard. Am I right, guys? Yeah, that's again another one of these people are like, oh, the right wing SJWs. They just want to push their ideas. They want to push their beliefs down on you. They're the same thing as the woke left. This and of course this is what they would say, right? Because so many of these guys, again, those left UGs that he just talked about, came over because they said, "Oh, well, now the left is acting like the religious right." Right? They actually bought into this idea that the religious right were their real enemies in the 80s and 90s, and that there's this beautiful moment of centrism that occurred in like the late 90s, 2000s, and if only they could get back to that, everything would be fine. But ultimately, we understand that that is just not the case. Uh, Jay Burden says, "Sorry I couldn't make it, but it's been a great episode." Well, thank you very much, man. Yes, I had initially invited Jay Burden to talk on this subject because I know this is something he's very good on as well. But I know he had to work. Glad you're watching, though, man. Definitely looking forward to speaking with you next time here. Paladin YYZ says Ted Cruz called out how ridiculous the Biden looked when he froze up on the stage. Boom! Take that, Globetrotters. The Generals are going to sweep the finals. Yeah, exactly. We've pointed out once again that Joe Biden is inept, that he's not cognitively functional. So therefore, it's all over. Right, the left is just about to be defeated because the thing that has been very obvious from the beginning of the Biden presidency is still obvious now. Sorry, guys, but we're going to need more than this. There's a structural change necessary. There's a real change in both tactics and strategies that needs to occur. Pretending that you can just keep pointing out the hypocrisy and the incompetence of the left, and that's going to eventually secure permanent change is ridiculous. Creeper Weirdo says, I'm eating Tindies while watching now. DW mogged. Oh, I'm sure they're doing just fine over there, guys. Don't mog them with the Tindies, or maybe you do. I'll leave that to you. Let's see. We've got Tiny Stupid Demon who says, wait, so let me get this straight and correct me if I'm wrong here. But if I understand, you're saying what you're trying to say is that the square peg does go into the square hole. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, like I said, we really have to understand that there are discussions that are unpleasant for a lot of people, that the left has put off limits for a lot of people, that we need to have. Yes, you need to use power. Yes, it matters whose morals are governing the United States. Yes, we need to understand the way that we are connected to all kinds of things in our society, how those things shape us, and why that makes us the country that we are. Like, and if you sit around and pretend that's not true, then people will be able to tell you're a liar. And if there's one thing that is always going to lose you in kind of in public debate, it's everyone recognizing that you are trying to run from and hide from something that is powerful and true. Now, the left obviously is doing this, and it's, I think, while they are wielding power effectively now, ultimately it is hurting their ruling formula. It is making them weaker. They're having to exercise a lot of raw power to avoid talking about the things that they are destroying in their pursuit of totalitarian control. But that will eventually come for them. There's no way that they can continue this forever, and the right shouldn't fall into the trap of believing that they can exist inside the rules that the left has set for them. The right cannot be a set of things that the left lets us do. I'll say that again because I think it's really important for people. Conservatives, the right, whatever, the new right, whatever you want to call it, the resurrection of the old right, you cannot be a collection of things that the left lets you do. If that's actually the way the political discourse unfolds, then you've already lost. Why bother? Why bother showing up? UM536 Vids says, I'm sorry, sir. Don't you know that if we are renormalizing around Christian principles, this isn't armies. Can I take your order? Uh, I don't know, man. I think that we have to do that. I'm not. This is probably a joke here, but yeah, I think that we of course do have to do that. Pretending that that's not what is going to allow people to create a healthy community and society is ridiculous. We are going to have to be informed by something. Those principles will be connected to some kind of religious vision, some moral vision of the world. If it's not going to be Christian principles, then it will continue to be the woke principles that we have now, which is a very cheap, ugly religion. It is not a real religion. It is standing in for religion, but everyone will have to have one. There's no such thing as a secular society. Let's see here. Life of Brian says, I once saw Wokel Distance post a lucid thread on how wokes bypass rationality and only manipulate and concludes that we have to debate harder. Yeah, that is a very interesting thing that they often point out. Look, Wokel is of course correct that very often woke ideology does get around rationality. It does bypass rationality and manipulates people on an emotional level, on an identity level, on a level of faith, and that's why they win because they are manipulating fundamental forces that are far more powerful than that of rationality. But the answer, so many people who rail against the quote unquote woke right, the thing that they say is, well, we'll just need to return to rationality. Well, how? If you've pointed out that these people are very effective at getting around rationality, the rationality is not the end all be all, that epistemology is broken, that this like scientism or this hyper rational understanding of the world is broken, and that is not the only way that we can understand truth. If you don't understand that and you're going to continue to let these people take advantage of that, then you can never really fight back. You're always going to lose to these people who are connecting to other ways, other modes of understanding things that people really do understand and connect with. Like if you're ignoring them, if you're not appealing to them on these levels as well, not that doesn't mean you just abandon rationality. Rationality is, of course, still extremely important. We use it all the time. But pretending that this is the only thing that moves men is just to completely ignore what has happened in politics, well, forever, but very much so in the last couple decades. If you really believe that, then you have a very hard time explaining the world we're in now. And I think if you continue to do what you've been doing, you're going to continue to get what you've been getting. Jonathan Peugeot, sorry, Creeper Weirdo again here, says Jonathan Peugeot is on our side, so I feel pretty good about our side. Bring him back on the show, Auron. It would be very cool. Yeah, I had a great time talking to Jonathan Peugeot. He's a very interesting guy. You're correct that he uh, understands this in a way that many people in the IDW do not, and that he is doing a lot of great work explaining that. I had him on, and we had a great discussion. He enjoyed it. He wanted to come back, so I definitely need to schedule another one of those because it was definitely a favorite for a lot of people, and I really enjoyed it, and he really enjoyed it. Um, just Low Dash here says we hit the wall hard, the wall Jordan Peterson didn't want us to touch. The right goes too far when we're for our people and not abstract ideas. I think that ultimately Jordan Peterson, if you were able to have a discussion with him on this, would understand that a people are a shared set of these ideas in many ways, right? That it's not just those things, but he understands the importance of the canon of grounding things in a biblical tradition. That's the only way you can have a shared language to understand and model the world around us. I can't say that I've listened to a lot of Jordan Peterson lately, but he would have the foundations for those things. Ultimately, I think it is important to go ahead and understand that those contexts from which we arise, that kind of substrate layer of reality from which we kind of build ourselves, is definitional. It does create us. It does define large parts of us. It doesn't mean that we don't have agency. It doesn't mean that other people can't. Again, there's a certain level of cultural assimilation that can occur over generations and these kind of things. But you have to understand that there will be a dominant culture. America was predominantly a Anglo and Protestant nation for most of its history. Those folkways, those traditions, those ideas, those principles, those religious bonds are what tied America together. If someone moved here and they were Catholic or Jewish, or they were of an ethnicity that was outside of those traditions, it didn't mean that there wasn't an ability for them to exist necessarily alongside the United States or as a part of the United States. But they had to understand that that was the water in which they were going to swim, that this would be the dominant culture and would remain the dominant culture, and that was going to continue to define almost all of their social interactions. And a lot of people did do that. A lot of people did make that, that journey and with that assumption. But over time, we've moved too many people in here who did not believe that, did not understand that. We did it too rapidly, so it was impossible to make any kind of assimilation. Did it with people who are increasingly far outside of the tradition to the point of becoming very difficult to, in any way, go ahead and assimilate to any part of that tradition. And ultimately, we lost a sense of a majority culture. And if you lose a sense of a majority culture, you will lose the definition of your people. And I think that that has to be something that you are willing to touch as a effective person who is talking about what the future is going to look for the right. If you just don't have the ability to do that, then you're just going to lose. The left is going to win, as they should, because you cannot discuss the most critical issue of our time, the one that Samuel Huntington, who is not a radical, is a centrist. He taught at major universities, but his question is, who are we? And if you cannot answer that question, that is the question of our age. If you cannot answer that question, you will lose to the people who will. Robert Weinsfeld says a republic, if you can keep it. And by keep it, we mean 2+ hours of combat sports training and 2+ hours of Bible studies per week. I mean, it's really true. It's amazing how much people love to quote that quote from Benjamin Franklin saying, it's a republic if you can keep it. But then we don't bother about doing any of the things that will allow us to keep it. We don't recognize what it means to keep it. What allowed us to have this type of government? Well, we just read John Jay, founding father. Supreme Court justice tells us, what it would take, what forms that, what allows that, and then we just ignore it. The people who tell me, I want to go back to the founding, you mean, but not the one that the Federalist Papers talks about. What founding are you wanting to go back to? Oh, you mean the 1990s? And that's my problem with people who tell me, I want to go back to the principles of the founding fathers. You probably don't. You probably don't. Whenever I hear that from people who are talking about going back to principles of the founding fathers, I don't believe them because they almost never actually understand the principles that they're talking about. Even if you think that the founding is perfect, then would need to go back to it. And none of them are interested in that. And that's my problem with people who they claim the founding fathers, they claim America, the authority of the American founding, but they have no interest in what the founding fathers actually said. Are you looking to reduce the franchise? Are you looking to get rid of the standing army? Are you interested in becoming one people with a shared language, a shared religion? No? Oh, okay. Because that's what the founders talked about. You believe that the Constitution is only for moral and religious people, and that if you aren't those people, then Constitution can't govern you? Because that's what the founders believe. With so many people talking about going back to the founding, they don't care. They don't know anything about it. For them, the founding is Ronald Reagan or William F. Buckley or Bill Clinton. That's what they want to go back to. They have no interest in actually going back to the principles of the founders. Let's see here. Glow in the Dark says, no matter how great the system is, without the proper people in place, it won't function properly. New phrase, a system is only as functional as its corrupt manager or weakest leaders. Look, it's true that ultimately it is the people that make the country. It is not the system. We cannot rely on institutions or systems or documents to go ahead and keep us who we are, to protect our principles, to validate our country. That simply will not work. If you don't have the right people, if you don't have people who love this country, who love these people, who love who we are and what we were and what we're going to become together, then you simply cannot operate. You simply are focused on the wrong things. And that has been a disaster for the right. They've continued to do this. It's been a complete failure. That's why they don't preserve anything, because they don't love anything. They don't actually love anything. They just have ideology. You can't survive on ideology. It's not enough. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching today. Really appreciate all the comments. Love talking to you guys. If you'd like to make sure that you can go ahead and get these broadcasts live, so you can participate, you need to go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, turn on the notifications, click the bell so that you can go ahead and make sure you catch these broadcasts when they go live. Sorry. You also need to go ahead and, if you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, make sure that you subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And when you do, leave a rating or review. It helps with the algorithm. Also, guys, the book has been just going crazy. It's been wild to watch. I brought a bunch of them and sold out when I went to the conference I spoke at recently. It's been amazing to see the response. If you have not picked up your copy, of course, you can do that on Amazon or You can pick up at your local bookstore. It also shows up at Barnes and Noble or Books a Million. Though I've heard it sells out a lot of these places, and apparently it's sold out in the UK too. So sorry about that, guys. Hopefully there'll be more coming in soon. But if you do go ahead and pick it up on Amazon, dropping a rating, of course, really helps as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching once again. And as always, I will talk to you next time.